I was 30 years old when this happened, though at times it feels like another lifetime altogether. My days usually follow the same quiet rhythm. Work in the city during the week, then retreat to my farmhouse on weekends for a little solitude. That morning, the sky was washed clean after a night of rain. The air smelled of wet earth and grass, and the only sounds were the chirping of birds and the occasional rustle of leaves as the breeze danced through them. I had rolled up my sleeves, a bucket of water by my side, and was carefully washing my car. There was something calming about it, moving the sponge in circles, watching the dirt slide away, and seeing the paint glisten under the morning sun. The farmhouse had always been my escape, a place where no one asked questions and no one expected answers. As I rinsed the soap from the hood, I heard footsteps. At first, I thought it might be one of the workers or a neighbor passing by. But when I turned, I saw someone I'd never met before. A young man, no older than 25, stood at the edge of the driveway. His hair was slightly messy. His shirt clung to him as if he'd been walking for a while, and his eyes carried a spark of curiosity I couldn't ignore. "Nice car," he said casually, his voice carrying an energy that felt too alive for the sleepy morning. I straightened up, still holding the hose. "Thanks. You lost or something?" He shook his head, stepping closer without hesitation. "Not exactly. I was just passing by and saw you working on it. I love cars." Couldn't resist coming over. Something about his openness made me smile. Most strangers would have been hesitant, but he walked right up as though we were already acquaintances. "You like cars?" I asked, tilting my head toward the vehicle. "More than like," he replied, grinning as he bent down to inspect the tires. "I've always wanted to drive one like this. Honestly, I've never had the chance to really learn properly. My friends joke that I'm obsessed, but when you love something, you just want to be around it." He spoke fast, words tumbling out as if he'd been waiting for someone to listen. I handed him the sponge, curious to see what he'd do. "You want to help?" I asked. His eyes lit up. "Sure." He crouched down beside me, dipping the sponge into the bucket and starting on the side panels. He worked with more enthusiasm and skill, splashing water everywhere, laughing when suds clung to his arms. His energy was infectious. For a moment, the farmhouse didn't feel so quiet, so lonely. "What's your name?" I asked. "Armin," he said quickly, glancing up at me with a smile. "And yours?" "Adil," I replied, surprised how easily I answered. I usually kept my personal life guarded, especially around strangers, but something about him disarmed me. We worked side by side, and soon our small talk grew into real conversation. He told me about how he grew up nearby, how he'd spent years watching cars speed down highways, imagining himself behind the wheel. I told him about my job in the city and how I escaped to the farmhouse whenever life grew too heavy. "You're lucky," he said, leaning against the car when we paused for a break. "You got this place, your own space." I've never really had somewhere to call my own. The way he said it carried a weight, but he quickly masked it with another grin. He had a habit of brushing off seriousness with charm, and I found myself curious about what lay beneath. It was during one of those lighter exchanges, while we were rinsing off the last of the soap, that he said it, so casually, as if it were no big deal. "You know," he began, watching me from the corner of his eye, "I should probably tell you I'm gay." The words hung in the air between us, heavier than the mist of water droplets falling from a hose. My hand froze midair, and I turned to look at him. He wasn't nervous, though. In fact, he smirked as if daring me to react. I didn't know why it surprised me. Maybe because people didn't usually announce such things so bluntly, especially not to strangers. Or maybe because deep down, it stirred something in me I wasn't ready to admit. "Oh," I said finally, lowering the hose. "That's good to know." He laughed at my awkward response, shaking his head. "Relax, I'm not hitting on you. I just don't like pretending. Makes life easier when you're honest." I studied him for a moment, the confidence in his stance, the way his eyes held no shame. Honesty wasn't something I was used to. My life had always been built on half-truths, on keeping parts of myself tucked away. But here was this stranger, boldly declaring who he was without fear. Something inside me shifted. I didn't say much after that, just nodded and handed him another rag. But as we continued working together, I couldn't shake the thought, why had he told me? And why did it matter so much that he had? The car gleamed by the time we were done, but it wasn't just the shine on the paint that lingered with me. It was him, his energy, his honesty, and the strange curiosity he had awakened in me. When we finally stepped back from the car, the sun was higher in the sky, and the air carried a faint heaviness of heat. Armin wiped his forehead with the back of his arm, leaving a streak of soap across his temple. He laughed when I pointed it out, and in that small, careless sound, something tugged at me. I wasn't supposed to notice these things. The curve of his smile, the way his shirt clung to his chest, how alive his eyes seemed when they met mine. I told myself it was just because he was different, because he'd walked into my quiet world without asking permission. But even as I tried to reason with myself, I knew it wasn't the whole truth. I was attracted to him. The thought unsettled me. For years, I'd kept such feelings buried, tucked beneath work, responsibilities, and the safe distance of silence. I had grown used to solitude, to never letting anyone close enough to see me. And yet here was this stranger, less than an hour in my company, stirring everything I had tried so hard to control. He leaned against the car, stretching his arms over his head as if he owned the space around him. "You really live here alone?" he asked, glancing at the farmhouse behind us. "Mostly," I replied, my voice quieter than I intended. "It's peaceful." He tilted his head, studying me. Peaceful or lonely? The question cut deeper than I expected. I turned away, busying myself with putting the hose back in place. "Maybe both," I admitted after a pause. Armin smiled knowingly, then walked closer, close enough that I could smell the faint mix of soap and sweat on him. "You know," he said softly, "we could sit inside for a while. I wouldn't mind a break." I hesitated. My instinct was to keep things simple, to let him go on his way, to protect the fragile walls I had built around myself. But the temptation was stronger than my defenses. Maybe it was the way he looked at me, as though he could already see through the layers I kept hidden. Or maybe it was a quiet ache of wanting to be known. "All right," I said finally, my voice steady though my heart wasn't. "Come inside." The farmhouse was cool compared to the warmth outside, the thick walls holding the shade. I led him into the main room, a simple space with wooden furniture and a couch that had seen better days. He looked around curiously, his fingers brushing against the edge of the table as though he needed to touch everything to believe it was real. "You've got a nice place," he said, settling on the couch. "Thanks," I murmured, sitting across from him. For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy with something unspoken. I cleared my throat. "You really want to learn how to drive, don't you?" His eyes lit up instantly. "More than anything. It's like freedom, you know? Be able to just get in and go wherever you want." I studied him carefully. There was a boyish eagerness in his face, but also something vulnerable, like he was reaching for something he'd never had. I leaned back, choosing my words carefully. "I could teach you," I said slowly, "but maybe you could do me a favor in return." He raised his brows, amused. "A favor, huh? What kind of favor are we talking about?" My pulse quickened, the weight of what I wanted to say pressed against my chest, but I forced it out. "Something personal. Between us." For a moment, I expected him to laugh it off, to stand and leave, offended, but instead, his lips curved into a sly grin. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So, you're not as quiet and serious as you look." I felt heat rise in my face. "I'm just being honest." He studied me for a long second, then nodded. "All right, if that's the deal I'm in." The air shifted instantly. What had been playful banter now carried a charge, a current humming between us. I could hear my own heartbeat loud in my ears, as if my body betrayed me by revealing how much this moment meant. Without warning, Armin reached for hem of his shirt and pulled it over his head in one smooth motion. He tossed it onto the couch beside him, then leaned back casually as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His chest caught the light from the window, and for a second I forgot to breathe. Then, almost mischievously, he slid his index finger between his lips, biting down lightly as he looked at me. The gesture was playful, teasing, but there was an edge to it, an invitation wrapped in provocation. I swallowed hard, my thoughts scattering in every direction. Desire surged through me, sharp and undeniable, but tangled with it was something else, a strange, unsettling sense of care. I didn't just want him. I wanted to know him. I wanted to understand what lay behind those confident smiles and reckless honesty. The conflict twisted inside me. Was I crossing a line? Was I letting temptation blind me to reason? And yet, as his eyes held mine, I knew there was no turning back. I was already too far gone. I shifted forward, my hands resting on my knees to keep them steady. You don't make things easy, do you? I muttered, half to myself. He laughed softly, fingers still between his lips, and shrugged. Where's the fun in easy? His words lingered in the air, daring me to decide. Between lust, excitement, and something that felt dangerously close to affection, I sat on the edge of a choice I'd never expected to face that day at the farmhouse. And deep down, I knew I was already choosing him. The room seemed smaller after he pulled his shirt off, as if the walls themselves leaned closer, listening to the silence between us. I hadn't planned for any of this. A part of me wanted to push him away, to retreat into the safety of my loneliness. But the larger part, louder, braver, was done with safety. I shifted to sit beside him on the couch. The cushion sank under our combined weight, closing the space until our shoulders brushed. His skin was warm against mine, a steady reminder that this was real, that he was here. I inhaled slowly, catching the faint scent of soap mixed with something distinctly him. "You're quiet again," Armin said softly, tilting his head toward me. "I'm thinking," I admitted. "About what?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was better than silence. "About how fast this feels. About how I don't usually let people in." He gave a little half-smile. "Maybe that's why you need to." His words landed deeper than I expected. I turned to face him fully, searching his eyes. They weren't mocking, weren't careless. There was playfulness in him, yes, but underneath it, something steady, something that wanted to be taken seriously. I lifted my hand, almost cautiously, and let my fingers brush against his arm. He didn't pull back. Instead, he leaned into the touch as though my hesitation was all the invitation he needed. When I finally cupped his jaw, he closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if savoring it. The first kiss was hesitant, testing. Our lips barely touched before pulling away, but the electricity it sparked ran through my entire body. He laughed softly, almost nervously, and then leaned back in, closing the gap with more certainty this time. It wasn't the kind of kiss that demanded. It was the kind that asked, slow, searching, as though we were both trying to memorize the shape of each other's mouths. His hand found my chest, pressing lightly against my shirt, grounding me. I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, drawing him closer until the space between us disappeared. When we pulled apart, our foreheads rested together, breath mingling in the silence. "Why did you really come here today?" I asked quietly. He opened his eyes, meeting mine. For once, there was no grin, no playful edge. I was walking by. But truth? I've been restless. I don't really have a place where I belong. When I saw you here, working alone, something just pulled me in, like maybe I'd find what I was looking for. His honesty knocked the air from my chest. I had expected flirtation, maybe casual fun. Not this raw confession that mirrored the ache I carried in myself. "I know that feeling," I whispered, "wanting somewhere you fit, someone who sees you. Do you?" His voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. I nodded, my thumb brushing his cheek. "More than you think." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of recognition, of the strange comfort that comes when two lonely people realize they're not alone anymore. We leaned into each other again, this time slower, less about urgency and more about closeness. His hand slid into mine, fingers threading together like they'd always belonged there. My heart calmed, not because the attraction faded, but because something deeper had replaced it. I don't know how long we sat like that, kissing softly, breaking apart only to talk, then kissing again. The world outside, the car, the farmhouse, the ticking of the old clock, faded into the background. It was just us. At one point, he rested his head against my shoulder, his voice low. You know, people usually think I'm just messing around, that I'm only after fun. But that's not it. I want more than that. I want someone who doesn't just see the surface. I tightened my arm around him, feeling the truth of his words sink into me. You're not the only one. He turned his face toward me, his cheek brushing against my shirt. Then, maybe we're both in the right place. I smiled, a rare, unguarded smile I hadn't worn in years. Maybe we are. The minutes bled into hours. We moved from the couch to the floor, still wrapped in each other, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his childhood, the small house, the noise, the way he'd always dreamed of escaping but never quite knew how. I told him about the city, the weight of responsibility, the suffocating silence of success that didn't mean happiness. Each story stripped away another layer, until we were bare not just in body but in soul. Vulnerability had always scared me, but with him, it felt like freedom. At one point, he pressed his palm against my chest, right over my heart. You're different than I thought you'd be, he said. How so? I thought you'd be the serious, closed-off type forever. But you're warm. You care, even if you don't say it out loud. I swallowed, his words hitting too close. You make it easier to care. The look he gave me then, half soft, half surprised, was one I knew I'd never forget. By the time evening painted the farmhouse in gold light, I realized something I hadn't expected. This wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just lust, though that pull was undeniable. It was more. He wasn't looking for a fling, and neither was I. We were both searching for the same thing. Connection, belonging, the comfort of being accepted as we were. As he lay with his head on my lap, tracing lazy patterns on my arm with his finger, I thought about how quickly life could change. A stranger had walked into my world that morning, and by nightfall, he had already rearranged it. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen, and I knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The morning light crept into the farmhouse gently, slipping between the curtains and warming the wooden floor. I woke to the sound of birds outside and the faint rhythm of Armin's breathing beside me. For a moment, I just watched him. His face was softened by sleep, his hair messy, his lips parted slightly. He looked younger like this, almost boyish, and I found myself smiling in spite of the unfamiliarity of it all. When he stirred, blinking awake, he caught me looking. You stare too much, he mumbled, grinning as he stretched. Get used to it, I replied, surprised at myself at how easy the words came out. After a quick breakfast of tea and bread, he bounced up in the chair with renewed energy. So, he said, eyes gleaming, about that deal yesterday. You promised you'd teach me to drive. I chuckled, shaking my head. You don't waste time, do you? Life's too short, he shot back. Come on, before you change your mind. His enthusiasm was impossible to resist. We stepped outside, the car gleaming in the fresh sunlight from yesterday's wash. I tossed him the keys. He caught them awkwardly, his eyes widening as if they carried more weight than metal ever could. You're really going to let me? He asked, half serious. I said I would. I answered, sliding into the passenger seat. But don't think I'm letting you off easy. Driving isn't just fun, it's responsibility. He slipped into the driver's seat, adjusting himself nervously. His hands hovered above the wheel, fingers twitching like he wasn't sure whether to grip or caress it. Relax, I said gently. It's not going to bite. Easy for you to say, he muttered, then finally wrapped his hands around the wheel. The first few minutes were chaos. He mixed up the pedals, jolted the car forward with a lurch, and cursed under his breath when he stalled the engine. I couldn't help but laugh, though I tried to hide it. Don't laugh at me, he groaned, slumping against the seat. I'm not, I said, still smiling. I'm just enjoying the show. He shot me a playful glare before straightening again. I'll get it. Just watch. And he did try, again and again. Each mistake came with either a burst of laughter or a frustrated sigh, but he never quit. I admired that about him. Where others might have walked away, embarrassed or defeated, Armin leaned into the challenge. His determination was as fierce as a smile. At one point, he pressed too hard on the accelerator, sending the car jerking forward. I reached out instinctively, my hand covering his on the wheel, steadying him. The contact lingered longer than necessary. Our shoulders brushed, and I felt the warmth of his arm through his shirt. "You got to be gentle," I murmured, guiding his hand to ease a turn. "It's not about force, it's about control." He glanced at me, eyes flicking down to where my hand rested over his, then back to my face. His grin returned, softer this time. "You sound like you're talking about more than driving." Maybe I was. We moved through the empty dirt paths near the farmhouse, his laughter filling the car every time he messed up. With every correction, I found myself leaning closer, showing him the gears, adjusting his hands, calming his nerves. Teaching him to drive wasn't just a lesson. It was an intimacy of its own. Every touch, every shared laugh, every moment of frustration followed by encouragement drew us tighter together. "You're patient," he said after a while, catching his breath during a pause. "I've had practice," I replied, adjusting the mirror for him. "With people or just with cars?" I hesitated, then answered honestly, "Not with people. Not until you." The way he looked at me then, eyes soft, mouth parted as if he wanted to say something but couldn't, sent a warmth through me I hadn't felt in years. We drove slowly for over an hour, circling the farmhouse, practicing starts and stops. By the end, he was sweating and laughing, exhausted but proud. "I told you I'd get it," he said triumphantly, killing the engine and leaning back in his seat. "You did," I admitted, unable to hide the pride in my voice. "Not bad for first day." He turned toward me, his expression shifting from playful to thoughtful. "It's strange," he said quietly. "I thought learning to drive would just be about the car. But with you, it feels like more than that. Like I'm learning something bigger." I tilted my head. "Like what?" "Like trust," he said simply. "Like letting someone guide me without feeling weak. Like maybe I don't have to do everything alone." His words hit me like a mirror held up to my own heart. That was exactly what I'd been learning too. Sitting beside him, watching him struggle and laugh and try again, I realized it wasn't just about teaching him. It was about letting myself share, letting myself be needed. "You're not weak for trusting someone," I told him. "It takes strength to do that." "And you," he asked softly, "do you trust me?" I held his gaze, feeling the weight of the question settle between us. "I think I do." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of everything we weren't yet ready to say out loud, but felt all the same. He reached for my hand, fingers tentative at first, then firm as they threaded through mine. "Good," he whispered, "because I trust you too." We sat there long after the engine cooled, sunlight streaming through the windshield, our hands locked together. The car had become more than a vehicle. It was a symbol of the road we were beginning to travel. Not just asphalt and dirt, but the messy, uncertain, beautiful path of learning to love. As the day faded, I realized something profound. I wasn't just teaching Armin how to drive. He was teaching me, too, how to let go, how to be patient with myself, how to open my heart after years of keeping it shut. And for the first time in a very long time, the road ahead didn't feel lonely. It felt like the beginning of a journey worth taking. The days that followed slipped into a rhythm I hadn't known I was missing. What began as an unexpected encounter stretched into mornings and evenings that felt like they belonged to a different life. One I'd only ever dreamed of. Armin stayed. At first say it was just for a night or two, but neither of us brought up the idea of him leaving. It was as though the farmhouse itself wanted him there, as though the silence I had grown used to was finally learning to speak. We found simple ways to fill the hours. Some mornings we cooked together, though cooked was a generous word. He was clumsy in the kitchen, burning bread, or dropping spices into the pan with reckless enthusiasm. I teased him for it, but he laughed every mistake away, insisting that taste wasn't everything, that food was meant to be fun. And somehow, even the burnt edges felt warm when we ate together, sitting across from each other at the old wooden table. Afternoons we wandered through the fields surrounding the farmhouse. The earth was soft under our feet, the sun gentle as it dipped lower in the sky. He'd point out shapes in the clouds, making stories out of them, while I listened, amused by how easily his imagination colored the world. I wasn't used to someone filling silence with joy instead of noise. With him, even the stillness felt alive. At night, we'd sit outside beneath the stars. The farmhouse had always been surrounded by quiet, but with Armin, it was no longer empty quiet. We lay on our backs, watching the constellations, our shoulders brushing as we spoke. Sometimes we talk about nothing, songs we liked, dreams we'd had. Other times, the conversations turned deeper, carving paths into places I hadn't shown anyone. One evening, his voice dropped lower, carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. "You know why I wander so much?" he asked, eyes fixed on the stars. I turned my head toward him. "Why?" He was silent for a moment, then said, "Because I don't have anywhere else to go. I grew up in a house full of noise, but no love. I left as soon as I could, but since then it's been one place to another. People let me stay for a while, then I move on. No one really wants me to stay." His words cut through me. Beneath his endless laughter and charm was a loneliness that mirrored my own. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Maybe they didn't deserve you," I said quietly. He glanced at me, a small, sad smile tugging at his lips. "Or maybe I'm just too much for people. Too restless. Too honest." "You're not too much," I said firmly. "You're just waiting for the right person to see you." For a long time, he didn't reply. He only squeezed my hand back, his thumb brushing over my knuckles like he was memorizing the shape of me. Another night, when the air was cool and the fields were silver with moonlight, it was my turn to speak. I told him about my life in the city, the job that looked good on paper but drained the life out of me, the family who never asked questions but always expected answers, the way I had learned to hide the truth about myself. "I've always been closeted," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Not just to others, to myself, too. I told myself it was easier that way, that I could live quietly and no one would notice what I really wanted. But that kind of life, I shook my head. It's not living, it's pretending. Armin's eyes softened, reflecting the moonlight. "And now," I said, turning toward him fully, "I don't feel like hiding." "Not with you." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached up and touched my face, his fingers tracing along my jaw with a tenderness that said more than words could. "Then don't," he whispered. "Not with me." The space between us dissolved. We kissed under the stars, not with urgency, but with the quiet certainty of two people who had found what they didn't even know they were searching for. The night wrapped around us, holding us close, and for the first time, I felt like the sky itself was listening. As the days stretched on, I realized something I had never understood before. Intimacy wasn't just about bodies. It was about souls. Yes, there were moments of touch, of laughter that ended with us tangled together in the dark. But more powerful than any of that were the conversations, the silences filled with trust, the way he leaned against me without needing to ask, the way I found myself planning meals and mornings as though he were always meant to be there. He'd tease me for being serious, then kiss me until I laughed. I'd steady him when his restless energy made him feel like he didn't belong anywhere, reminding him that here with me he did. Slowly, the walls I had spent years building began to crumble, brick by brick, under the weight of his presence. One evening, while we cooked together, him making another mess of flour on the counter, I caught myself watching him with a strange ache in my chest. It wasn't just desire. It was something deeper, heavier, sweeter. The realization came so suddenly it almost startled me. I was falling for him, not in the reckless way of a fleeting crush, but in the quiet, unshakable way of someone who has finally found what they were missing. He noticed me staring and raised a flour-dusted eyebrow. "What?" "Nothing," I said, smiling despite myself. "Just, you belong here more than you know." He froze for a second, his grin faltering, then softening into something gentler. "So do you," he whispered. And just like that, I knew we weren't just passing time. We were building something fragile, maybe, but real, something that could last if we were brave enough to let it. For a while, Everything at the farmhouse felt like a dream I didn't wake up from. But reality has a way of creeping in, even into the safest spaces. The more time Armin and I spent together, the more the outside world pressed at the edges of my thoughts. One morning, after we'd finished breakfast, I caught myself staring out the window for too long. The quiet between us stretched, and he noticed. "You're somewhere else," he said softly, tilting his head at me. I forced a smile. "Just thinking." "About what?" I hesitated. The words slipped out before I could stop them. "About what people would say if they knew." The change in his expression was immediate. His shoulders stiffened, and the warmth in his eyes dimmed. "So you're worried about them?" "It's not that simple." I tried to explain. "I built a life, a reputation. If people found out about me, about us, it could destroy everything I've worked for." Armin's jaw tightened. "So I'm supposed to be your secret? Something hidden away, so your world doesn't get shaken?" His words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. I opened my mouth to argue, but the truth caught in my throat. I don't know how to live openly, Armin. I've never done it." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see the hurt rising in his eyes. "And what about me? Do you think I came here just to be another hidden mistake? Do you think I wanted to give myself to someone who's ashamed of being seen with me?" My chest tightened. "That's not what I meant. I care about you more than you realize." "Then prove it," he said sharply. "Because right now it feels like all you wanted was my body. A favor in exchange for a driving lesson. Maybe that's all I ever was to you." The accusation cut deeper than I expected. "That's not true," I said, my voice breaking. "You're more than that to me." But he shook his head, pain flashing across his face. "If I was, you wouldn't be so afraid. You wouldn't be looking over your shoulder every second, wondering who might find out." Silence fell between us, heavy and sharp. My mind scrambled for the right words, but none came fast enough. He pushed back on the table, his chair scraping against the floor. "I can't be someone's secret," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "Not again. I've lived that life already, and it nearly broke me. I thought you were different." "Armin, wait." I stood, reaching for him, but he stepped back. His eyes lingered on me for a moment, full of something between anger and sorrow, and then he turned and walked out. The farmhouse door closed behind him with finality that echoed through the room. I sank back into the chair, my heart pounding in my chest. His words replayed in my head, louder with each repetition. Was he right? Had I treated him like a passing fling, even if I hadn't meant to? I pressed my hands to my face, the weight of my own fear pressing harder than ever. I wanted him. I wanted us. But wanting wasn't enough if I couldn't find the courage to stand by it. As the silence swallowed the room once more, I realized the truth. The choice wasn't just about him. It was about me, about whether I was willing to stop living in the shadows and finally claim what my heart wanted. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough. The silence after Armin left was unbearable. Every creak of the old farmhouse seemed louder, every shadow heavier. I paced the room for what felt like hours, replaying his words until they scraped against my chest. He was right. I had let my fear of the world come between us. I had made him feel like a secret, when all along he deserved to be the brightest part of my life. I couldn't sit there any longer. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The night was cool, the air carrying the faint scent of earth and grass. My heart pounded as I scanned the property, searching for him. Then I saw him, leaning against the hood of the car we had washed together on the day we met. His arms were crossed, his face turned away, but I could see the shine of his eyes in the moonlight. I walked slowly toward him, each step heavy with fear and hope. "Armin," I said softly. He didn't look at me at first. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be inside, worrying about what people might think?" The bitterness in his tone stung, but I didn't back away. I stood a few feet from him, my hands trembling slightly. "I'm not here to hide anymore. I'm here because I can't let you walk away without knowing the truth." That caught his attention. He turned his head, his expression guarded but curious. I took a deep breath, forcing the words past the tightness in my chest. "When you showed up that day, I thought it was just chance. I thought you'd help me wash the car. We'd talk a little, and then you'd be gone. But somewhere between your laughter, your honesty, and the way you look at me like I'm worth seeing, I realized I don't just want a moment with you. I want more. I want everything. I've fallen in love with you, Armin. His eyes widened, the defenses in his face cracking. I stepped closer, my voice unsteady but true. It's not just desire. It never was. You've made me see myself in a way I never dared before. And yes, I've been afraid of what people might say, of what I might lose. But the truth is, losing you would be worse than all that combined. For a moment, he didn't say anything. His gaze flickered between my eyes, as if searching for any trace of a lie. Then his shoulders slumped, and a shaky breath left him. I was scared too, he admitted, his voice breaking. Scared that you only wanted me for a night, that once the fun was over, you'd send me away like I was nothing. I've been left behind too many times before, and I didn't think I could survive it again. Hearing that shattered something inside me. I closed the distance between us and cupped his face gently in my hands. You're not nothing. You're everything. And I'm not going to let you go, not if you'll stay. His eyes glistened, and then the walls between us crumbled. He stepped into me, burying his face in my chest as my arms wrapped tightly around him. I felt his tears soak into my shirt, and mine weren't far behind. We stood there, holding each other as if the world itself might try to pull us apart. I don't care what anyone thinks anymore. I whispered into his hair. What matters is us. You and me. We'll figure out the rest together. He lifted his head, his cheeks damp, but a small, trembling smile spread across his face. You mean that? With everything I have, I said, kissing his forehead. We stayed like that for a while, until the night no longer felt cold. Finally, he pulled back slightly and gestured toward the car. You know, he said with a faint laugh, I never did get that driving lesson. I chuckled, brushing a tear from his cheek. Then let's fix that. Sliding into the passenger seat, I handed him the keys. His eyes sparkled nervously as he settled behind the wheel, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. Don't worry, I said, placing my hand gently over his. I'm right here. The engine roared to life, and slowly, under the blanket of stars, he pressed the accelerator. The car jerked at first, causing him to curse under his breath. But soon it found a steady rhythm. We laughed through every mistake, through every bump and stall, until we were gliding down the quiet dirt road that stretched beyond the farmhouse. The headlights lit the way ahead, but I realized it wasn't just a road we were on, it was the path we were choosing together. Every turn of the wheel was a step forward, not just in driving, but in us. As the wind rushed through the open windows and the night wrapped around us, I glanced at him. His smile was wide, his eyes alive with both fear and freedom. And in that moment, I knew we weren't just moving down a road. We were moving forward in life, together,